So we get the privilege to tell some stories and to listen to some incredible people and their stories. Yeah. And of course, we're kicking it off with like the home team, right? Because Megan Oglesby, who stepped into the foundation, the Congdon Family Foundation in 2018. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's been running the show for years and doing this incredible work and been in that mix of people that are making the downtown redevelopment happen and helping these nonprofits throughout the community. And like, she's such good friends with Christy Barber, and I love their vibe and their backstory and the way that the two of them feed off each other and connect.
So organic.
Their creativity when they get together, right? And then bring it when they brought Amber in. I mean, everybody thought that was like the perfect fit, right? To bring her skill set into High Point Discovered to tell those stories. So
absolutely.
It's a good first podcast.
It is. It's exciting. Yeah. So, just to kind of kick off, I would love to share the mission of these organizations so that people kind of know going into it what we're talking about on each episode. So even though
you've got it pulled up.
Even though I wrote the mission statement.
I was going to say, do you remember the mission statement?
I know. Maybe the true test is if I cover up my iPad and actually say it. Yeah. So the mission of High Point Discovered is to communicate the stories of our city, to connect our community and catalyze economic growth. With our rose-colored perspective, we tell the stories that help people fall in love with High Point, North Carolina. And I'm just so thankful that the foundation decided to approach High Point Discovered, give us the opportunity to take a lot of the stories that we have told and are excited to tell into a new form of media over podcast, audio, and video. Yeah. And I'm just thrilled to kick it off with this episode that we got to spend talking with Megan, Christy, and Amber. So let's take a listen. Ladies, thank you so much for being with us today on this inaugural pilot episode of High Point's Voices Discovered.
Yeah, it's good to have you all here.
Happy to be
Thank
here.
The people who are really making it possible for us to do this all in one room.
Seriously, it's good to see you.
We're excited to be here. Thank you.
So let's just start with a brief introduction of who you are, what role you play, and let's say how long you've been in High Point.
My name is Amber Williamson. I am the executive director of High Point Discovered. Whoop, whoop, parties of people. I have been working in this capacity for just over a year, just celebrated my 1-year anniversary. Have been working in the thank you, Christy. Have been working in the High Point community for now just over 6 years.
I'm Christy Barber, founder of High Point Discovered. Really excited to be here today. Lifelong resident of High Point, was not born here but moved here as an infant and have watched this city evolve and change over the years, which was, quite frankly, part of the evolution of High Point Discovered.
And I'm Megan Oglesby. I'm the executive director of the Earl and Kathryn Congdon Family Foundation. I was also born and raised here in High Point. Love the city. I will admit my bias, but the city is the best. I've lived a few other places, and I'm happy to be home. I remember I was working at the chamber. It was in, 2016? Mm-hmm. There was this really cool Instagram account that was just saying, "Did you know?" And it had all these really cool spots around High Point. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so simple. The photography is really good. There's really good facts. I was like, who's behind this? And I was working at the chamber, and I was collaborating with the director of marketing. I was like, maybe we can figure out who's behind this, and we can do some sort of partnership. So I reached out, crickets, nothing. Meanwhile, Christy and I have been friends for a long time, and we went to lunch one day, and she said, we were in a very crowded Blue Zucchini, and she said, do you know that Instagram account? I was like, oh my gosh, is it you? And she said, yes.
Just so happens.
Yes. So, and we had a long conversation about, the purpose of it. At the time, it was under your business, just as sort of a side project.
Well, it was a passion project that really started around the kitchen table for me and my family. As a lifelong resident of High Point, I was seeing all the great things that were happening, but it felt like it was falling on blind eyes, deaf ears, so to speak. And everybody's nodding. We all know this.
The tide was turning.
Yes.
2014, 2015,
Yes.
you started to see the energy, but it was
in pockets. Like
yeah,
everything was
it was
sort
hard
of
to
dispersed.
see. Like,
It was hard to see. And if you weren't in those pockets, you were completely blind to it, right?
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about what if everybody could see the things that we get, the privilege to see, the small business owners that are taking risks, the nonprofits who are investing in our community, the university that was changing so significantly at that point in time, the High Point market and how it was evolving and what an important part it was in our community, what the city government was doing. So because I happened to be privy to see all those things, I could see the shift, but so many couldn't. So it was a frustrating point for me that one night around the kitchen table was solved because we were talking with our kids and we were saying, how do you help other people see? And of course, their immediate reaction was Instagram, photos. We're like, yeah. So it started as a personal passion project where we did nothing but go around, take photos of things in High Point and tell stories with Did You Know?
And who is we? You and the mouse in your pocket?
Me and the kids, actually.
Oh, really?
Even
Okay.
when they were little. Yeah, we would just, take a Saturday and we go around the city and take photos on my iPhone, and here we are.
I remember one of the early ones was on, I think it's just a picture of the pit.
Yeah.
And I'd heard about the pit. I had not been there. But you posted some pictures and I'm like, where in High Point is this?
You're like,
And
it's
it
too
was
cool
a
for High
period
Point,
where
right?
HPU students were obsessed with taking pictures in the pit because it looked
Big
trendy
city.
and
Yeah.
big city.
Yeah.
And it's like, where is this place? And it's like a mile from where I'm working and going like every day. And I mean, it was that again and again of like, oh, it might have been somebody I'd seen or a business that I'd gone to, but you were showing a different side of it.
Yeah.
That just like it felt like these little pockets of energy were starting to come together.
So let's back up just a little bit. I would love to hear, you mentioned several times, Christy, that you had the privilege of being able to see what was happening kind of behind the scenes. And Megan, I know you've articulated similar things. Tell me about your story in High Point that let you kind of be behind the curtain. And really, I think both of you have been people in the community who have been those like curtain pullers, right? You're throwing those curtains back, opening it for all of High Point and beyond to see in your respective roles at your nonprofits. But tell me a little bit about the journey that allowed you to see behind that curtain and even motivated you to kind of be that person who was going to throw open the drapes.
Oh my gosh. So I think my journey of falling in love with the city started with Leadership High Point through the chamber. So I was working in the corporate world at the time and, in my mid-20s, very self-centered and as we all are, right? And so I started Leadership High Point and I didn't really have a lot of expectations. I was like, I've lived in High Point my whole life. I know about High Point. What am I going to learn? Not only did I learn that I knew nothing about High Point, I got to meet so many incredible people, both in my class and on all the field trip days where we went and met with city government. We met with nonprofit leaders. I mean, we met with, the leaders in Market Authority, all of these different people that make High Point so special. And the work that they're doing and the collaborative spirit. And I just was like, how do I get involved? Like, how do I help you? How can I be a part of this? And so later that year, it was like right after graduation, the chamber posted a position. It was the events and I'm trying to remember, I've had a couple positions there. It was events and leadership coordinator. And so I applied for it and thank God Rachel believed in me and hired me. And so my journey to getting involved in the community and kind of getting behind the curtains really started with Leadership High Point and in the chamber. And it's still like, yes, we have some really beautiful buildings in our city. We have some really great businesses, but behind all of that are the people, and one of the things that especially nonprofits and our small businesses is that they've got these great stories, but they're just not good at telling them. One, they don't have the skill set and they don't have the resources. And so as we, I tried to collaborate when I was at the chamber unsuccessfully with High Point Discovered.
Which I just learned this morning, by the way.
But it was a timing thing, right? Like had we tried to collaborate then, I don't think it would have been what it is now. And so one of the cool things too is just being able to hear these stories and different perspectives that make High Point so unique. And so High Point Discovered has done a beautiful job of doing that. And then of course, so I was at the chamber for a couple of years and then transitioned to my role with the Congdon Foundation. And then now I'm able to work in a very collaborative environment as well, where we partner with nonprofits like High Point Discovered, like the chamber, to really continue to do great work in our community.
Christy, what about you? I mean, she said a lot of things that I think are the linchpin of what High Point Discovered is, mostly around the people. I mean, the people are the thing. Like, that's what I always tell people: connect with people.
Exactly.
Right. So what were some of those behind the curtain moments for you that led you to be motivated to make the people the star of the High Point show?
Well, I'll talk about the people first rather than myself. When Megan said, you know, the intriguing part was learning more about the people, about what's behind our city, because as you noted, we've got beautiful buildings, we've got beautiful architecture, there's some really interesting things going on, but when you really stop and look at it, what is truly intriguing are the people and the stories. And that's one of the things early in the days of High Point Discovered, which was why I asked Megan to go to lunch that day. But I realized really quickly that, you know, you were talking about taking pictures of the pit or different businesses, things of that nature, that if we could get people engaged and intrigued in a place, it was one thing. But if we could tell a story about the people behind those places and behind those businesses, that is the impact of change. Like, I knew in my heart, that's how we're going to impact change, where someone might go to a yoga studio and actually become a member because of the story behind that person, or someone may go buy coffee at a particular place because they love the story behind the owner of the coffee shop. And so that was when I approached Megan and a handful of others and said, I have this crazy idea. I want to tell stories, and I want to tell them in a much broader sense than a quick, did you know, Instagram catch. So poke holes in it. Tell me why this will fail. And so I'm grateful I've got good friends like Megan, smart business people who also truly believe in a vision that supported that idea. In regards to my own curtain, I would say...
tell us about it. Tell us about you. What gave you the insight to be able to like see these things that you wanted to highlight?
Well, I would say my journey is almost opposite of Megan's. You know, I didn't really see all of the great things from the community perspective until later. I came out of college, head down, career driven, and just working the grindstone. And so I met a lot of business owners. Because I'm in the industry, I was affiliated with the High Point Market and ultimately, you know, learned more about that. And then each relationship led to another relationship, led to another. Later on, I started learning about the community and all the good things there. I was involved in a lot of the different nonprofits, and each time I learned about the impact that those nonprofits were making on our community as a whole. So fast forward, you know, years later, then I looked back and I'm like, wow, I'm really well connected because I have insight to what's going on at High Point Market. And I'm seeing what's going on at High Point University. And I'm seeing what's going on in some of these amazing nonprofits and the arts community. But
also, too, what you're hearing from all of these people that were coming in twice a year, you know, the 75,000 visitors, and how they looked at us, they love High Point. You know, they had glowing things to say. And yes, you know, the market does a great job of you know, rolling out all the, you know, red carpet and, you know, the making it really glamorous, but you know, people love our city for all of the character and the people and the, you know, the nuances that, you know, we as citizens didn't appreciate.
Exactly.
And so that was an interesting thing, because I was like, if all of these people that are successful business owners, entrepreneurs, international, come to our city and can say and see great things about our city, why can't we? And so like your ability to tell the story and to show the imagery in a beautiful way that speaks to the heart and soul of our community in a way that, like, you know, those lenses from the visitors, like that to me is so impactful.
For years, my only association with market was don't go out to eat during market.
Yeah.
Right? Like that.
You can't.
That was the advice that I got, that I didn't
Rent your
know.
house, go to the beach,
Yeah.
get out of here.
Yeah, I mean,
What year did you move here? You moved here in
2011.
2011. Yeah.
And when you start to peel back what market has and what it offers and the creative people it brings into our community and the resources that are there are just like unbelievable. And the average resident doesn't see any of that. And I'm thinking, I mean, just because of your job, you're seeing inside market,
Yes.
which is one of the hard things for average citizens to kind of see. You were also seeing inside High Point University because I was working in the chapel building as you all were like redoing the chapel on campus. So that's another place that's hard for residents to get in to see the kind of magic that's happening in that place. And so like you're getting into these pockets where like most people can't
Absolutely.
get, and then being able to lift those up and tell the stories of the people that are kind of just making that stuff happen is awesome.
Yeah, I would say I had that unique perspective because of what I do for a living, you know, my real job, my day job.
Yeah, when Joe says you all, he means Barbara Spangle.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
As a designer, different
Right,
hat.
your other hat.
Yeah, I'll put a different hat on. But because I have the privilege of being inside of all of those different areas of the community, and, you know, to piggyback on what Megan just said, because I travel a lot, but often I travel within the circles of our industry, and most of those industry people know of High Point. So no matter where I was in the country or the world, I would say I was from High Point, and the immediate reaction to your point was, oh my gosh, I love High Point.
Yeah.
And I would just hear these glowing remarks. It gives me goosebumps. People would get so excited and they talk about how beautiful our city is and how kind and friendly all the residents are and how much they love our restaurants and what Southern gracious hospitality we have. And I'm like, everybody else outside of High Point sees this. Why are the people that are living in the city, some, blind to that?
So why do you think people weren't seeing that? I mean, we talk all the time about perception is reality, and such a big founding principle of why you started High Point Discovered was to elevate that brand perception. And that doesn't mean, you know, not being authentic. It just means showing the perception and the perspective of the people doing the good work. I think there's a lot that dovetails there with advocacy, which we can get to, but why were people struggling to see that version of High Point, to see that narrative?
That's a great question, and it's one that I believe has a lot of nuanced answers to it, but the immediate one I would say would be people can become very comfortable in their bubble. I'll call it a bubble, and then they become blind to what changes around that bubble. So, you know, I'll use my parents as an example. Poor people. I pick on them all the time, but I used to use this when I started it. For years, and they don't do this anymore, but for years they would drive to Greensboro for great restaurants.
Yeah.
And, you know, when they first started doing that, they probably passed, you know, maybe one or two restaurants on the way there. But, you know, as the years went by, the more great restaurants and the more great restaurants they were passing to get to Greensboro. And I think it just becomes, you know, habit.
Right. You go to Greensboro when you're going to have a night out.
Exactly.
And it's like, wait, you don't have to.
Yeah.
And that was what I wanted to disrupt. I wanted to disrupt the thought pattern of we have to go somewhere. We have to leave High Point because High Point has so many great things here. And the other thing, as a small business owner, I know personally, firsthand, how important it is. If people in our community don't support you, you're not going to make it. And so the key to that, which is that trickle-down effect that is significant, is if we don't support the handful of things we have, we won't get more and more and, you know, and new. And so my concern was if we're not supporting these new places that are coming about, this was roughly 2016, we're going to be in real trouble because then we won't have anything.
Right. And you came to High Point Discovered with a kind of world of understanding all of these incredible assets. Will you say a little bit about? I want a little backstory on Amber.
So, you know, again, all of it's kind of crazy how our stories are all intertwined, very intertwined, you know, ordained, you might say. So I actually had a 5-year career at the Chamber of Commerce where I got to work briefly with the Megan Oglesby.
There's a little overlap there, right?
And so I started in communications and ended up being able to coordinate our Leadership High Point program that's in High Point. And in my first Leadership High Point class, I met the Christy Barber. And that was just a unique spark of being able to, one, have people go through the mud with me in my first year leading that program, and then also having the support of Megan through that. So there has always been a great support system. But at the Chamber, I took pride in supporting our small business community. Yeah. A lot of people came needing assistance, and at that time, and still now, social media is the thing that no one can truly manage. Like, everybody's like, what? We need to get on social media. And me being a recent college graduate, of course, everyone thought I could run their social media, which was not necessarily the role at that time. But it's been refreshing on this side when I was looking to make a transition and there was an opportunity at High Point Discovered for me. It was just a natural fit.
And, Amber, I remember when Christy told me that you'd been hired. And everybody started to find out that you were moving from Business High Point over to High Point Discovered. It was like, of course. Like, that is such
obvious, right?
an obvious connection. Like, you were just this perfect fit because of all of the relationships and knowledge that you were bringing into the space. And just, like, people love to connect with you. Like, you were the cheesy chip of the business community through that start of COVID, and people were turning to you, and then to say you're going to come over to High Point Discovered and let that part of your personality and your gift of connectedness become the profession. You're going to do this. It was such an incredible fit.
Well, I'll say this truly has been a gift. It's a gift to continue to learn from the Christy Barber and Christy Spangle, the Christies as I call it, and to work with Hannah. I think it was a natural progression because, again, I did love supporting that business community. But one thing that had an even stronger pull on my heart was the actual community.
Yeah.
I felt I knew the business community and the wonderful professionals that are, again, working in this space. But how do we pull in the people that are just going to benefit from the fruits, the people that are going to Stock and Grain, the people that participate in all these things. And so that's where I was like, okay, if I can turn some of the work that throughout my career I've been doing it and focus it more towards this community facing, that truly is the thing that is continuing to rev the engine. And so I feel like connectivity as a whole, every person on our team, on our board, anyone that has a hand in High Point Discovered, that is the vein that they lead through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I want to address a little bit of something there too. The thing that we said, probably, you said it, Christy, for a while, that you wanted to cast High Point in this light of this unapologetically rose-colored lens.
Yes.
Right. But at the same time, one of our brand values at High Point Discovered is authentic belonging. So I would love to hear a little bit about why it's important to look at and recognize need in a community, but not to stop with recognizing the need and to actually take that rose-colored approach of saying, who are the change makers? What does that look like at your respective organizations?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Joe and I have a lot of conversations around mission creep, right?
Yeah.
So you can't be everything to everyone, right? And so one of the things I love about High Point is that we do have so many different organizations that are doing great work in different spaces. So when our foundation's approach to give support to a nonprofit and it doesn't fit within one of our areas of focus, so we have 3 areas of focus. One is education, so addressing or increasing access to and quality of education, and that's broad on purpose. The second one is critical community needs, again, broad on purpose, thinking about kind of how do we support our local community clinic, our Greater High Point Food Alliance, Open Door Ministries, all of those things. And then the third one is economic development for revitalization and stabilization. And so that all 3 of these are very broad. However, we will be approached for things that are just outside of our scope or just is not the right timing or whatever it is. So instead of just saying, no, we don't do that, we say that doesn't quite fit us, but how can we help you find resources elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I think also in our world, there's this language of shifting from need to asset, and it's a shift in mindset, right? Because when we see the world just through need, we're looking at people's deficits and what they don't have. None of us like to be viewed that way. I mean, we all have things that we can get better at, but we don't want people to like lead with that, right? Rather, when we're looking at grants or nonprofits, yes, we'll ask like, what's the need or what's the challenge? But one of the other questions is like, who are you collaborating with? And that's our way of saying, well, what are the assets? So like you're trying to tackle this need, but none of us can do any need that is worthy of your passion, of like pouring yourself into, is too big for you, right? You have to have partners. You have to have collaborators. You have to see all these assets. And like, that's what I love about the foundation work, is that we get to see the big picture of all these incredible assets and think, how do we connect these to like solve the big problems? And in many ways, that's what I think High Point Discovered is doing, is it's trying to help our whole community shift from a kind of need-based perspective on our city. Like, so what do we need? Do we need a ballpark? Do we need more restaurants? Do we need more this? Do we need more that? To an asset-based perspective, where we're like, what are all the incredible things that we have?
Exactly.
And how do we continue to grow and build on these incredible things that we have?
Exactly.
And as soon as you flip that mindset, like the potential that you can see, I think just dramatically opens. I think that's the gift of High Point Discovery. And that's why it's authentic, right? These are true assets in our community. They're real. But you have to come at it with a perspective where you can see their value and see how they connect with each other.
And that was exactly going to be my answer, is that the genesis of High Point Discovered was based on the assets of what High Point, the city, actually has. And we can be an asset to all the other players in the city. So it goes in both directions. That's why I love where we sit, because we can celebrate all the assets of the city, and then we can also be the best asset for all the players in the city.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be asking you questions, not giving your answers.
It was a good one, Joe. It was a good one.
Well, and on that note, Christy, I would love for you to just share a little bit about why from the very beginning you took that hard stand that this was going to be no pay to play. I don't know how many people in the community know, but we've never charged anyone we've ever featured, whether they had the funds or not. And can you talk a little bit about why that was such a both strategic and, emotion-filled decision that we were going to draw that line in the sand of equity for the community?
Well, anyone who knows me, so all of you sitting around this table, know that it was emotion-led first. When I very first started posting the Did You Know posts, like in the very early days, the responses I got from the businesses were just heartwarming. They would DM me and say, I had a new customer today. I made a sale because of you. You've made an impact. I now have a new member. And I realized really quickly what this authentic, true, just genuine gift of putting somebody else in the spotlight could do. The feel-good factor on that, you can't even put into words. And so as High Point Discovered grew and we launched the blog and we started telling even more stories, a lot of people came to us. They wanted to advertise. They wanted to pay to be featured. Yeah. Thank you. In the blog or on the Instagram page. And we collectively, sometimes it was just me, sometimes it was all of us, but we had this internal gut that wasn't the right thing to do because of that community equity. We wanted it to be an authentic lens of things that just needed to be promoted and celebrated. And so as things developed, it went from feel-good, emotion-led to definitely hard line in the sand, a business decision. And that business decision was really kind of baked at our very first lunch.
Well, I was going to say that at that lunch, I remember you revealing yourself, and then
coming out.
You said, "Well, I'm going to put our business, Barber Spangle, is actually going to put the money. We're going to front the money. We're going to start a blog, really pay for professional photography, not ask for a donation, actually support other small businesses around this." And I was like, "Well, why are you doing this?" And you're like, "It's for our community." I'm like, "Well, then that's nonprofit." I mean, there's a way for you to do that if you want to explore it.
And guys, when she said that, like my brain was like exploding. Like nonprofit, what? So
Yeah.
fast forward probably 18 months later.
Yeah.
I go back to Megan and I'm like, okay, let's talk about this more.
Well, and it really just comes down to you wanted to make sure that your stories always stayed authentic and true to their purpose and not swayed by whether it was perception or reality of funds coming in.
Sure.
And you wanted people to support it that really believed in it.
Yeah.
And so what I'll say for our foundation, the reason why we support High Point Discovered and we want to partner on podcasts like this is because when we're thinking about rising all boats with the tide, right? We're making sure that everybody has access to opportunity and meet them where they are. It all goes down to what are the opportunities out there as far as creating a life, creating income, the jobs. So when we're looking at attracting new businesses, whether they're small startups or large businesses like Toyota Battery, they're looking at the number 2 thing on the list is quality of life. And in quality of life is what is there to do? What are the schools like? Where are the restaurants? All of that. And if if these companies and the big companies are doing very strong research and deep research into these communities, if all they see is negative, they're never going to come here. So it's in our best interest as a community to tell our story in a way that attracts people here. And it also, tells people here to stay.
Well, exactly. It's that beautiful ecosystem, right? It's kind of like chicken and egg at this point. Like, do the stories make more people move here and bring more things so more stories happen? Or is it the other way around, that as people move here, we get more stories, right? Yeah. I don't think it matters anymore. I think that what mattered was taking that step and that leap of faith, both for the foundation and for High Point Discovered, to say enough is enough. Like, enough with the negativity. We're going to draw a line in the sand and say, we're proud to be from here, and we want you to be proud to be from here too. Yeah. Because when you have that sense of pride, I mean, that's what's going to really drive you to invest and you to stay and you to open your business or start a nonprofit, right? And so from, your perspectives, why is it so paramount to the success of a community for people to have that sense of ownership, to have that sense of pride? What does that look like even today?
Well, with Pride of Place being our central tenement at High Point Discovered, I think it really shines a light on opportunity. As a former HPU student and alum and someone who has planted my career here, the connectivity that I've had throughout my career is what truly made me say, like, oh my gosh, High Point's the place for me. I can make a difference in High Point. I can stand firm on my decision to support High Point entities. I love these business owners. They're my friends. I want them to succeed. I love Christy Barber. I love Megan. Like, these are people that truly have their hand in the ground. Like, you see people that are actively moving, not for their own benefit, but for the benefit of our entire community. And I think when people lock arms in that force, that collaboration, that's when we're like, okay, we're moving. We're all chugging and we're going in the same direction. And so with that, having not only the pride of High Point, it's the pride of the people that are making High Point. And so I'm just, every day I come to work excited and blessed to drive and see the High Point city line that's ever expanding, might I add, and to work with people that truly have that same heart. And I think that High Point Discovered has become a beacon for people to come that have that unique disposition. And if they don't have it already, they are developing it because their perceptions are being shifted.
Yeah.
On that note, Amber, I was going to say our mission at High Point Discovered is to communicate those stories, to connect citizens and catalyze economic growth. Yes. Can you share a little bit about, even in the last year that you've been here, what kind of that has looked like recently and what it's going to look like in the future for High Point Discovered to make good on that 3C mission, as we call it?
So I smile at Hannah. Hannah smiles back at me because she knows what I'm going to say. So in my, I think, 3rd month of working in High Point Discovered, for some reason, God dropped an idea to do a event for our Latinx population. Hispanic Heritage Month was coming up. I serve on the YWCA board. And I called Heidi and I said, girl, this may be a little crazy. And I know it's 3 weeks until, but, I would love to see if there's a way that we can collaborate with the Latino Family Center to do something that, it's not, we don't have to have a speaker, free flowing, just let's get the community out here. And we did a Noche de Baile with the Latino Family Center and Visit High Point, collaborated as well. And we connected the community with some resources that were in Greensboro that actually had been trying to make a connection in High Point. So Casa Azul came out, and they are a phenomenal organization, as well as we were able to support some local businesses that provided our entertainment. And we had over 100 people out doing bachata, salsa, out in stock and grain. And one thing that I'm huge on, and I say this often, is space equity. Like, people, when they come to High Point, they need to feel welcomed in High Point. And I know my friends always say, like, Megan, there's a difference between being invited and being welcome. Yeah. And so opening the doors, like, yeah, you can come in, but like, no, this place is for you. And I feel like that's what High Point, the energy we're bringing to High Point and these new spaces and resources that are coming up. And so we had a phenomenal night. One of the comments that had come to me through that planning experience was one of the individuals said that they didn't know that this space was for them. And so through that experience and, us being a connector, we not only, of course, offered some economic growth through that night for the stock and grain, but we also connected a community to a place that traditionally they did not feel welcome. Yeah. And so that was one of the things that early on I was like, I'm proud of this. Secondly, I will also say Hannah Ray has about a baby a year with our magazine. She looks great. She's actually in the first trimester of her third one right now. Yeah. But we had a phenomenal magazine launch party. And I think that was the first time we, as a full-time staff of 3, had the opportunity to really come together and celebrate the work that is pretty much the monumental, the epicenter of what we do at High Point Discovered. And it was beautiful to see so many different people in the room. It was a great party. It was. You were there, Joe, yes. But I think that was the thing that truly warmed my heart, was we had different people from different spaces. Yeah. And different worlds and different walks. And I'm used to going to luncheons and seeing the same people. But to be in a place that, again, they were not traditionally, had not traditionally spent time in a showroom. So we had the location in a beautiful showroom, Modern History. Thank you for your support. And not only did they get to experience the space, but they weren't afraid to be in it. They weren't tiptoeing around. They lived in it for a second, and it was normal, and it was theirs. And they were proud of High Point. And so in the future, I just hope to create more moments that make people proud to be in our city. Yeah.
And one of the things I'll say about Hannah's Children, the magazine.
That's what I'm going to call them from now on. My children.
They are your babies.
It's a labor of love, right?
Yeah, it is.
But one of the things I'll say about not just the magazine, but it comes to fruition with the magazine, but everything that High Point Discovered does is the quality, right? Like it is super high quality. It is showing High Point in the best light through the best quality possible. And I love that because, you could do it for cheaper. You could do it, average. We could have it be, mediocre. But the fact that you're doing it in such a professional, high level production on everything that you do speaks to the caliber of people behind it and the people in High Point. And so I know it takes a lot more money and a lot more hard work to do that. But it's so important because it's translating in all these other things, right? We're finally getting to the point now where, as a community, we don't want to settle for mediocrity. We want to be what we know we can be, right? We're the city of creatives, right? Like, we're the creative city. Let's show that, and let's do it through a beautiful way. And the magazine, Joe and I actually had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with some staff of Our State magazine, which is a really beautiful production. And we gave them a couple of copies of the High Point Discovery magazine. And her first response was, "Oh my gosh, this is really nice." And her second response was, "There's no ads in here."
Right.
We said, yep.
But,
people are taking notice, right? That those things matter. And it's just how we're presenting ourselves, right?
Exactly.
Well, and, again, like you said, this is not us being interviewed, but if I could just add a little something from my perspective. Yeah, I think that I really appreciate you sharing that, Megan, because the other thing is that it kind of goes back to that need-based mentality, right? It's kind of like that idea of before, people were like a soup kitchen, right? Make a PB&J, throw it out there. You're already food insecure. You don't care, right? A story we did on a nonprofit called Hope Food Co. They do a food truck. I'm sure people have seen it. It's gone to a lot of High Point events. Their heart and their philosophy is that just because you're experiencing need doesn't mean that you deserve less than the best. You deserve a gourmet plate of food from locally sourced ingredients. That's amazing, right? That's how I feel about High Point Discovered. Just because you're a small business that just opened and has like a very minuscule, if any, media budget doesn't mean I'm just going to roll up there and take a shoddy photo and say, did you know it's an ice cream place or whatever, bye. Like, right, they deserve more. And so I think the fact that that's what they are feeling, another huge part of what I really appreciate about High Point Discovered and the foundation is that empowerment aspect, right? I've had people sit, and I say this all the time, I've had people sit in an interview with me, cry, read their story and say, how did you make me sound that good? And I'm like, that's what you said. You just needed someone to believe in your story and to share it and to give you the spotlight that you needed to feel empowered. And I mean, that's exactly what the foundation does as well, is saying we will empower you through advocacy, through financial support. I mean, that empowerment is everything. Yeah.
Like, we believe in you.
Yeah.
I think you're right. That sometimes having somebody affirm that, like, you are incredible. This is amazing.
This
work.
is what you deserve. You
it
deserve
takes that
this
moment
level
of affirmation sometimes.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to discount. I just want to make a quick statement for both organizations. Hannah, they may have said those words, but the belief that you had in them and the way that you articulate that back is a gift.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So for High Point Discovered, we're so very lucky to have you telling those stories. And that's why an organization like Our State Magazine is going to be impressed. And then Joe and Megan, there are a lot of community organizations that have benefited from you, but it's not because you just wrote a check. It's because you believe in them. And going back to what you were even saying, like, how do you support? How do you find the connections? You guys are going like five levels deeper to make an impact, not just write the check.
So I was going to add too, like, it's interesting to think about kind of our role that both of our organizations play in helping tell the stories, but not necessarily the stories themselves or, the grants themselves, but what does that mean, right? So Joe joined our foundation as the Chief Impact Officer, and he's made us 1,000 times better. Thank you, Joe. So we are a team of 2 for the foundation, but he's been one of my advisors since I got this role. And one of the things he said to me a couple of years ago, when we really were starting to dig into like who we are and funding some really amazing organizations, he said, Megan, the foundation, it doesn't matter the amount that you give, but when the Congdon Foundation gives a grant to a nonprofit, it says that this nonprofit is doing great work. And so it encourages other people to also support them in whatever capacity they can, right? Like our foundation is so blessed that, we can write large checks, but there's other things that everybody can do, right? Like, and with nonprofits, every dollar counts. Like I continue to be blown away by our nonprofits and how much they can stretch a dollar. I mean, it's super impressive, but also too, like some of the best ways you can support a nonprofit is the work that you guys are doing, which is advocacy, right? And telling those stories, making sure that like if they don't have the voice to say it, you guys are saying it for them.
The platform.
Yes, you're the platform.
And building their credibility and absolutely.
So before we kind of roll into some of these last questions, I do want to just ask really quickly if all of you would just say, what's a call to action, right? If someone's heard this episode and maybe this is the first time that they're discovering that they need to be proud of their city, or they want to figure out how to be proud and learn some of that stuff or be involved, even if it's just donating time or a talent, what would your call to listeners be, knowing the, kind of the North Star that guides all three of you to invest so deeply in this community?
Well, number one, I feel like my head would be on the chopping block if I didn't say this, but you definitely need to follow High Point Discovered. That's an easy to do. You can do that right now.
Sure, that'll be in the show link somewhere.
Yeah, show notes for sure, always.
Show notes.
But also, I truly think getting out and discovering something really intentionally, that can be through High Point Discovered, or it could just be used driving down Main Street and deciding to go into a store you've never been into before. These businesses, they need our support. And so I think something, if you care about your community, you care about the businesses that are sustaining your community. And that is easy to do. Another thing would be to visit Congdon Yards. I love community. And so just being able to connect with one new person. I know I'm a natural introvert, shockingly to some people, but I am. They look at me sideways when I say that. But I am intentional about meeting someone new. And you don't have to necessarily be able to write as beautifully as Hannah or some of our other writers to learn someone's story. So that would be my 2 things to do.
Love that.
Nice.
So a call to action that I think works for me, and I don't know if it translates to other people depending on where they are in their lives, but one of the things that I always try to do when I feel like I'm in a rut is do something different. So thinking about whether you're a visitor or you live here, like go on a date with our city, right? Like do a couple of things that are a little bit outside your comfort zone, or you've seen on, the blog or the Instagram of like, oh, that looks cool. Take the time to do it, right? Like go check it out. Yeah. Just some examples there are, if you have small children, we have this amazing place called Q's Corner. And it is an inclusive play place for children of all abilities, which is just so incredible. We've got, if you are a coffee snob, go on a coffee
crawl,
coffee bar hop and try all of our coffees, right? And everyone has, like, all the baristas have just super cool funky drinks. I am a boring latte, almond milk latte girl everywhere, but I encourage you to date your city, right? Whether it's here in High Point or if you live somewhere else, date your city and then start asking questions, right? Like ask the person behind the bar, why do you work here? What's your favorite thing about this place? And it's amazing how open people will be, unless they're in a hurry, and then you just kind of move on.
Well, awesome. It's been really great talking with y'all. And
this has been so much fun.
We blew past the time we thought that this would take, because we're just having fun talking with you.
Memory lane.
That's right.
But
Thank you, ladies, so much.
I mean, this big project of building a community, of building a city, it takes everybody. And I think the foundation and High Point Discovered together have made some magic. And I'm excited for our future podcasts that are going to feature more and more of the magic. So we hope people keep tuning in and listening to these incredible things that are happening in our city, and then go get involved in them.
Yeah, the story's not done, right? We're all writing it every day together.
Well, I feel like we're just getting started.
Well, and it's a mutual love fest. So I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you, thank you for the support that you guys have given from day one. Really, we really appreciate it, and we would not be sitting here today if it were not for you guys.
I told you it's going to be a good conversation. I mean, the energy from those 3 is incredible, and what they've accomplished. And I just love getting to listen to them and their story. So if you've been inspired by this podcast, Hannah, what should the people do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the best thing that we can do is follow along with High Point Discovered. The link will be in our show notes. You can subscribe to our email newsletter. You can subscribe to our blog to be able to read all these stories. But, subscribe to this podcast. We're going to be on Spotify, iTunes,
all the things,
Google Play, anything. Yeah, YouTube.
Pick up a High Point Discovered magazine at Congdon Yards.
Magazine at Congdon Yards. Yeah, absolutely. So I would say just follow along. I mean, the stories are just going to keep growing. We've got so many good ones lined up for this season.
Come get educated about our community and all the amazing things happen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for being here with me today, Joe. We're excited.
Yeah, right back at you, Hannah.
Yeah. Thank you to Amber Williamson and Christy Barber and Megan Oglesby for speaking.
The dream team.
On this topic. And thank you so much to our producers and creative team at Captivate Media helping us to produce this podcast. Stay tuned for so much more to hear and so many more voices to discover this season.